This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I am your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is the amazing J.M. Paquette. And our guest today, for the second time gracing this podcast with her presence, is Jody Lynn Nye. Woo! So exciting, so exciting. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking. So I have to say, in my Stormtrooper mug, in honor of Jody Lynn Nye, because last time she did this, I actually just have hot cocoa. There's no alcohol in it. It is just hot cocoa. And I was like, Jody, if it's good enough for Jody, it's going to be good enough for me. That's how that's going to work. JM, what are you drinking?
I am drinking tea in my Moon and Stars mug, but it's caramel corn. So it tastes like caramel popcorn black tea. It's so good.
That sounds brilliant.
That sounds
it's really tasty.
Weird. That sounds weird. That doesn't sound weird to
anyone. It's weird, but also really good.
I believe you. I actually used a cocoa ball. Is that what they call them for my?
Oh, where you get to those are.
Yeah, you put
cocoa
the ball
in or something. Yeah, those are beautiful.
Yeah, they're beautiful and it's yummy and there were marshmallows. I was very excited. It was like a gift. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jody, what are you drinking today? Let's all be surprised.
I am drinking hot cocoa. It's my drink of choice always. I have it for breakfast every morning, and because I decided when I became a grown-up, I could have whatever I wanted for breakfast. So I like hot cocoa.
I love that idea. I love that idea. I maybe bought myself a box of Fruity Pebbles and ate it in 2 days the other day because I was like, I haven't had Fruity Pebbles. I'm going to eat an entire box. My boyfriend is like, what are you doing? And
no,
I'm
seriously, like, you've got to do it sometime.
Putting it under my arm, nothing.
nothing. Cookie Crisp is my.
Cookie Crisp, that's yours? Okay. So, Jody, what is new and exciting with you since last we spoke?
Oh my gosh. Well, moving backwards through time, my husband has COVID at the moment. I had it 2 weeks ago. We were in Europe. Bill occasionally speaks on cruise ships, and we were on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean. And when you come back into the United States, they make you test before you enter to make sure you're negative. And the people who were in front of us got pulled out of line because one of their number tested positive. We were all masked, but it does not seem to have helped. I got sick.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You know, the guilty party. Look at that.
Well,
maybe.
I at least I tested negative and I could get home. They had to quarantine in Italy for 5 to 10 days.
Yeah.
So,
no.
Unlucky them.
They're very serious about that. I had a coworker who got stuck in Austria or something like that. Like, he was flying and they didn't test him on the airport he left from, but where he landed before he got on the next plane, they tested. And then we had to do a whole maneuver to get him moved to another country because he was like, it is terrible here. I forget where he was. I don't want to say Austria, and anybody listening from Austria, but it was like he got stuck somewhere and then we had to get him moved to another somewhere. And he was there for 2 weeks until he tested negative, and they tested him every single day.
Mm-hmm. Your nose hurts after a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you're on the mend. Yeah. And I hope your wonderful husband, who we thoroughly enjoy, although he is an epic taskmaster for this show, is on the mend soon too.
He is. But the thing that happened to me probably latest is that I have been named the coordinating judge for the Writers of the Future contest.
Ooh.
So I have been reading hundreds of stories, and there goes my tea kettle. Some of them have been absolutely brilliant and amazing. Some of them mind-blowingly good, and I feel privileged, but also sad at the same time, because the reason I got the job was my dear friend David Farland, who was the coordinating judge before me, passed away in January.
Oh, well, that is congratulations, but not for that reasoning.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's gotta be interesting reading, obviously, we do publishing, so we read people who submit and stuff, but what is it like to read for a contest that is that well known and that large and that big of a reach?
Well, I'm on the move back to my office, so the lights will
This
change.
is a live
as I
action
move past
podcast
things.
we're having for the first time ever, live action moving podcast.
Love it.
That's right. We have,
Like,
we're
Do you-
having a scene change.
CH.
do you
Well,
use like a
it's,
rubric or a score sheet?
Fortunately, because there are so many stories submitted, I have a wonderful friend who is helping me out. She is Carrie English, who is a
Oh.
former winner of the contest as well. They have 3 winners per quarter, 12 a year. And she was one of them, I think, 6 years ago, 7. And she reads through the initial quantity of stories, and I get the ones that she thinks are worth passing on. And I review them for several different placements, either honorable mention, silver honorable mention, semifinalist, and finalist. The finalists are voted on by the other judges in the contest, who include people like Kevin Anderson, Larry Niven, Rob Sawyer, Greg Benford, my goodness, Catherine Kurtz. So
Oh.
a lot of very notable people whose names you probably have on your own bookshelves. And it's and once a year they have a wonderful grand gala where the 12 winners from the writers and the illustrators both come, and they spend a week in Hollywood, honestly on Hollywood Boulevard, getting pointers on their careers and receiving some really very pretty awards and money, and having an honest to God black tie red carpet gala.
Hey, as writers, I don't think often enough we get red carpet galas for anything that we do. So,
Right.
You're lucky if you get a punch card. I like to make fun of Bram Stoker's gives out when you're like a runner up, but you don't win, you get a punch card. And I think it's like after 10 punches, they just give you the award just because you've not done it. Because my friend Jeff Strand won this year, and he made a joke about turning in his punch card, and he had something like, Jeff will kill me when he listens to this, 7 or 8 punches or something like that on his card. And he was, but it says, free Bram Stoker award once filled out or something on it.
Oh, that's
It's really
brilliant. I love
funny.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. No, this is a great start for young writers, and the stories that they produce are really good. They are ready to move into professional circles at that point. But it's tough competition. There are so many stories submitted every quarter, but every quarter anybody can submit 4 times a year, 1 story per quarter. And some people just keep on sending and sending and sending, and sooner or later they'll probably place. So it's a terrific opportunity for kids to enter. The contest is free, unlike many writer contests where they ask for an enrollment fee of some kind. This is completely covered by the contest. So I
think it's
great.
fantastic because, there's so many things that need to change in the publishing world, and having to pay to get published. I say that on any time I'm asked to talk anything about being published, I say, if somebody wants money from you to be published, walk away. Like, it's not worth it to pay somebody to publish you. Vanity Press, contest, any of that stuff, like, just go away. It's not worth it if that's the case.
Money should always flow to the writer, not away.
1000% agree. Well, what about you with writing? It's been a couple of years since we had you on. Where is your writing to?
Well, a lot of things happened during the pandemic and before, so I'm kind of behind on things. I did publish a nonfiction book for rewriting your manuscript. It's called Once More with Feeling. I've written a number of short stories that, but I've been working on a couple of novels for the same couple of years, and I feel I am working on them again, but I lost my dad during that period.
Sorry for your loss.
It's been complicated. Bill and I have both had COVID now 3 times.
Oh my goodness, 3 times?
Yeah, we caught it in February of 2020, just when nobody knew what was going on yet.
Me too.
And yeah, so did she.
You too, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so pretty severe case. Then in January of this year, we think we got an Omicron because we only realized in retrospect that we both felt kind of off and cruddy. And remember, with COVID, there's a whole host of symptoms. There's like 16 symptoms, and you put your hand in the jar and you draw out a handful, and no two people have the same ones, the same combination. So we weren't even aware that we had it. We thought we just had colds. We just felt awful. So, trying to just pull life back together again, and adding to it the contest. But as my mother always says, if you want something done, ask a busy person.
Exactly.
And ask somebody who likes a challenge. Yeah. I
Yep.
think it's definitely interesting how much COVID has changed our culture, because now when somebody has any of those 16 symptoms, the first thing out of somebody's mouth is it COVID? Like, did you test for COVID?
Mhm.
Right.
My son actually had a temperature. I went down to Florida, and I was down there the third week of May or something like that. And I arrived on a Sunday, and he was like, yeah, he didn't say anything Sunday night. Then Monday, I got a text saying that, when it was a friend of his joking when he comes back to work. And I texted him because I was staying at the house with him. And I'm like, are you home? He's like, yeah, I got a temperature. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I'm like, I didn't say anything because I was like, of course he's going to test, like, duh. And then I went out to dinner with friends that night, and I'm like sitting at dinner, and then I'm like, wait, did you test? And he's like, no, why? And I'm like, and he goes and does the test, and he sends me a picture, and it's positive. And I'm like, that better be a pregnancy test, dude. That better be.
They look just
So I
like
had a
them.
mad scramble to somebody else's house, because I was like, I can't stay there. And knock on wood, for the amount of close calls like that I've had literally exposure, and Jen can attest to it, where I've been face to face with the Rona, I've not gotten it once. Now, I did get the vaccine, and I did get at least the first booster, but knock on wood, I didn't get it. But all that week I was doing tests every single morning, because I'm like, do I have COVID? And the friend's house that I went to, they had it twice. And I'm like, are you sure you want me to come? Because I may be bringing round 3 to you. And they're like,
Well,
no, it's fine. Luckily they didn't get it. I think, Jen, you had it how many times?
I had it twice. I got it right before Dragon Con last year, so I couldn't
oh
go.
no.
I was like, no. But
Do you have a
yeah.
lot of allergies, Erica? I read an article today that said that people who have allergies tend to be more resistant to COVID than
I
people
have
who
so
don't.
many allergies. Pollen is my enemy, and I'm allergic
You
to
are-
coconut. I'm allergic to latex. I'm allergic to penicillin. Apparently, like, woohoo, I've built up everything, but pollen is my demon that comes in.
Well, I don't. I have one allergy, and that's to a medication. So that makes me more vulnerable than you are.
But I
You
saw
actually-
that I saw that article too, and I'm allergic to a lot of things like UV light and alcohol.
Jen
Yeah.
is our resident vampire, by the way, because she is actually, I've known her long enough that this changed from her being a perfectly fine human being.
I was normal
to-
once.
And then we used to go out drinking, dancing all the time. Now she's allergic to alcohol of any kind.
I'm the only person with an EpiPen for liquor.
Yep.
Ooh.
And then she developed this over time. It wasn't instantaneous, it's developed. And now she's actually also allergic to sunlight. So
I
she has
am
all
allergic to sunlight. I break out in blisters.
So
Do you?
is she.
Yeah, I get hives, and then it just I have to get out of the light, or it just keeps getting worse. So,
Look, you two have found each other.
right?
Two of the rare people on the
Nice
planet
one.
allergic.
Like when it first happened, I was like, what is happening to me? Like you can see every line where the sun touched me. And then over like the next month, I went to the hospital, there was like they tested me. They thought I had lupus, which I don't, because I guess that's one of the signs for an autoimmune. But they were like, yeah, you're just weirdly allergic to UV. Just get your car tinted. So I got to use my
the life-giving
to tip my windows. So that was awesome.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
I recommend Coolibar or Solumbra clothing because they are sunproof. They are very good. Yep. Everywhere. So
Yep.
Everywhere.
And I'm the one that sits here and I'm like, I can drink and go out in the sun all I want to, like a party, except for when there's pollen out there. That's one thing I've discovered about North Carolina. Florida has pollen, but there's so many trees up here that it like pollen has coated my deck. My deck is coated in pollen. And I discovered this only because when I walked outside, I was like, what am I stepping on? And then Jonathan, my boyfriend, came and he was like, I'll blow the deck off. So he goes to blow it and it was like a cloud of pollen. And I was like, no, pulling my shirt up. It was pretty bad. It was a pretty bad experience.
It's like that here. We're in Georgia now. I don't know if we were in Georgia when I talked to you first, but I can't remember.
I don't remember either, but you're back in Georgia. And we get to actually see you at Dragon Con this year. Knock on wood, we've been invited to speak. For some reason, they wanted to hear our ridiculousness, so we'll see how that goes.
That'll be fun.
Invited back.
And if you are at Con Carolinas next weekend, I am going to be there.
Are you?
Yes.
I was debating driving over there. I'm going to make a note. That's
cool.
Worthy of driving over. So let me.
Yes, I'm on programming there, and there is a new award being given to people who mentor other writers and persons called the Polaris Award, and I will be the first recipient. So that's
very cool.
Yeah.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
Oh, thank you. I am honored. It's very nice of them to have thought of me. So should be interesting. It's the first time I've been at Con Carolinas, and everyone I know who has been there said that they love it. So that'll be great.
No, we were gonna go. I'm on a mission this year to check out how cons are for getting a writing booth set up, our publication booths and for writers and stuff. Because there are a lot of cons you can go to that can be big cons, but they're not good for authors and stuff that go to those cons.
Right. It's not good for business. It's not good for meeting readers.
Yeah. So you have to kind of go and go, how is lay of the land here? I'd rather buy con tickets, do that than pay hundreds of dollars for a booth and then be like, this is terrible.
Yeah, this is not a reader crowd.
No, not at all. So what are the short stories that you've been putting out?
Oh, I would have to look at my list again, but I had one published in Thrilling Adventure Yarns 2, edited by Bob Greenberger.
Oh, very cool.
It is a follow-on to a story that I wrote for an anthology. I have this character called Trouble. Her real name is Carrie Lynn, and she is brilliant, but she and reality don't get along very well. So her long-suffering cowboy boyfriend, this takes place in the around the turn of the 20th century, so 1890-ish. And she and her father comes up with inventions, and Carrie Lynn finds an opportunity to mess with them. The first one was it was a humorous steampunk Old West science fiction adventure.
Wow.
Trouble in an Hourglass. Time travel. And the second one is more or less straightforward steampunk humorous science fiction Western.
Oh my gosh.
Trouble on the Rails.
Wow. That's fun.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. And let me see. I'll have to check my list here because goodness knows my brain goes blank when somebody says, well, what have you been working on? Oh my God. Like I can remember.
You're like, what haven't I been working on?
What happened? Well, I guess that's probably a true thing. So what have I got on the list here? Let's see. I'm in Chicks in Tank Tops, which is edited by Jason Cordova, which I think is coming out imminently. The 4 question marks of the apocalypse, and edited by Keith DeCandido, and that will be a lot of fun because he said, name your 4 horsemen, and somebody's doing dinner ladies and someone else is doing lawyers, and I naturally am doing cats. So it's called Apocalypse.
I love it.
Let's see. What else have I got here? Go back to the stories. Lost Cities of Earth, edited by Jeff Sturgeon, I think is finally out. And we were to choose a city of Earth naturally, and I chose Chicago because I am a native Chicagoan. I have 3 stories in Writers of the Future anthologies, starting with issue volume 34. And I had a lot of fun with that because they occasionally ask judges to submit a story or let them reprint one, but I have given them original stories based on the cover art for that particular book. And they were not used to that because with the Writers of the Future, when they published the anthology, the 12 short story winners' stories are illustrated by the illustrator winners. And then the cover is done by one of the illustrator judges. So in this case, they had this beautiful piece with a wizard standing on a mountainside with his arms outstretched, inviting the silver dragon to land. And I said, oh, I can do that. I can write a story to go with that.
I was going to
So
say,
I've had
hands
fun with
down,
it.
you can write a story that goes with the dragon and all of that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it was funny too. So I had a lot of fun with that. And let's see, a few for online, for the Bain Books website, my Lord Thomas Cadago stories. I've got a few of those. One I was very fond of that came all the way back in early 2020 was for a book called Predators in Petticoats. And it's a new take on shapeshifters, or at least I think so, called Dominance.
Ooh.
So I've had a lot of fun with these. The opportunities have been wonderful, and I'm very proud to have been able to do that. So I'm working on several right now, including a few things that I've never tried before, but I'm going to hold back until I hear from the editors and see if they like my proposals.
I like that idea. I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
We have to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Jody.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
We're back to this epic storytelling. So what are the books you're working on then? The two that, got sidelined and then now are back into play. What are those two?
They did get sidelined. I'm working on a 1632 book with Eric Flint for his long-running series that's kind of time travel, very interesting. What if you've never read these books, they're terrific.
so good.
It starts with the book called 1632 by Eric Flint. What if a town in West Virginia got swept up and dropped into the middle of 17th century Thuringia during the 100 Years' War? And
wow.
What is going to happen when a whole bunch of Americans land in primeval Germany?
Oh my
in the
goodness.
midst of a very, very active piece of history. Yeah, it's a great series. And he has.
Did Charles Gannon write
started
one
a
of
lot
the
of
books in
people's-
that series?
Yes, he has written some of those too.
Yes, he was the one that brought them up to me. He's been on the podcast a couple times and he brought them up and he had wrote one. They sound just absolutely fascinating.
They are amazing. They have great characters. Eric loves a little bit of romance in his stories as well. And he is, you can tell a lot about the way Eric thinks too, the way the stories are structured, that the little guy, he wants that to come forward, to come out on top. He wants people to be able to cooperate with each other. And in a way, that's also the American way of, instead of just the nobles benefiting, the little guy benefits too. So I agree with his philosophy on that, and they're good stories as well. And he's had a lot of people, including Chuck Gannon and David Weber, other people who've written stories for him. And because Eric also publishes the Grantville Gazette, which is anthologies of short stories, he's given dozens and dozens of young writers their first professional publication. So he's the kind of guy who he's got a big tent. He wants to include people.
I think that's amazing. And a lot of the people I notice in the circle around you, and when I talk to other authors that are, Keith, things like that, there's so much give back that I absolutely love hearing about, like, to the community at large, because people do need help. They don't know where to go. They don't necessarily know where to start, and they don't know how to do things. And they're, as much as you can have school, it's kind of interesting to me, having done HR for a number of years, like a lot of people go to business, get a business degree, and they're not prepared to go to work in business. They're just not. They've done all these courses, and like they end up as data entry because you're not given the actual tools you need and mentor to succeed in a business type environment. And that's true with writing. Like, you can do a ton of classes in creative writing, and I mean this with all the love in the world, Jen, I do, but the actual nuts and bolts of getting a story published and into a publication or to a publisher and stuff like that, that is not necessarily included in the content of what you're learning when you get a creative writing degree, for instance. You may be a great writer, but as far as getting that great writing published.
And by the time, you take a class on publishing, a lot of it may be up to date then, but then by the time you graduate, it's already outdated. Like any information they gave you about trends or marketing or any of that, it's all changing.
Mm-hmm.
So you need a mentor to help you.
I taught at Columbia College Chicago 1 year, and the Fantasy Writers Workshop, and before that I was a cinema major at USC, going back even way farther. And the trouble is that nobody, when you graduate, is going to give you a job in film, and nobody's going to give you a publishing contract. You have tools. You have the idea of what to look at that might make a good story or might make a good script, or you have now held a camera, you have now edited film. None of that is going to work for a publishing house or a movie studio. Nothing succeeds like practical knowledge. In fact, one of my students, he was one of my A students, you can guess this, said to me during our student teacher conference, I had to have one with each of my students. He said, I realize now that I'm getting a college degree in what is essentially a hobby. So I'm going to stay on afterwards and get my teaching certificate, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to make any money on what I actually am doing, and I'll write while I'm teaching. And I said, that sounds like a very practical approach, because he was quite a good writer, but it takes more than a short story contract or 2 or 6 to make a living.
No, it's true. And it's true even more so now in the publishing world than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Getting published does not mean, and I think this was really interesting. I refer back to it a lot. I want to say it was 3 years ago, there was that Twitter movement, What Publishing Paid Me, like the hashtag What Publishing Paid Me, that was on Twitter, right? And and to their credit, and I give them a lot of credit, a lot of New York Times bestsellers, a lot of people who had the clout that said, I'm a very well-published author, whatever titles you want to put to it, went out and said, this is how much this paid me to do this gig, right? And it shows you that you have to do something a lot. Like I talk about working actors too. If you did film, there's this cream of the crust that makes $18 million paychecks in a movie. And then there's this huge grouping of working actors that constantly have to do movies or TV shows or whatever, voiceover work, read, audiobooks, stuff like that, to constantly, because they need a paycheck. It's like us. They need to actually have jobs to constantly have a paycheck. They don't just do one season of a show on CBS and they're set for life. That's not how it works.
My late brother-in-law was one of the great cadre of actor waiters in New York. He was, by the way, a terrific waiter. He put lots of his acting talent into it. He was also a musician, so he could play accompaniments, he could play club gigs, a pianist, but he was not making it as just an actor. He was waiting tables, he was doing gigs where he could. And almost every writer I know has some secondary form of income of some kind. Yeah. Almost no authors are independently wealthy or started off that way. The conventional wisdom is that when Larry Niven was 18 years old, his father, there's oil money in the family, gave him $1 million and said, don't lose it. But beyond that, everyone else has had to have a job of their own, a sideline, teaches, has a spouse who has a job. they have made investments and are able to live off that. But almost every writer out there has some secondary form of income or some other support. They live with their parents, they live in the basement, they are a caretaker for someone, maybe they're professional babysitters. Everybody has a different way of bringing in funds because the income from writing is so irregular that you have to be a good saver, you have to know how to take care of your money, and you know that you have to put aside a third of your income for taxes. So
Yes.
I always tell people who say, oh yeah, I'm going to quit and write books. And I say, do you have 3 years worth of expenses? It used to be conventional wisdom was 6 months of expenses. Not anymore. You could not possibly survive on it.
No, totally. 3 years. It's interesting because when Jeff Strand, I don't know if you've ever met Jeff Strand, he's a horror author, but he was talking about that and he got to turn into a full-time writer, but it was after he published 40 books, you know, and that's the other thing is like, you can be like, and he, you know, was very nice to his day job when he quit and left it with warm and fuzzies with the idea that if I have to, you know, he had the one letter written of the, I'm going to burn this house down kind of thing. And then the, hi, thank you for everything you do letter and handed that one in because if he had to go back because it didn't work out, but he had a number of books under his belt. And that's the other thing I think a lot of authors don't necessarily think with is the volume of work you have to produce to get to the part where you're making a living, and I use quotations for anybody not watching this on YouTube. You know, make a living doing writing. You have to adjust your lifestyle to know that you're not necessarily going to be the next J.K. Rowling's or whatever. You may be a working author. Look, I want to coin that term, working author, where you're writing, but you're having to write a lot and having to do a lot of gigs to maintain a lifestyle, right? But you're not going to be driving around like the top of the line brand new car all the time and stuff. That's not your writer's life. You know?
No, it isn't. And for some reason, people see the movies, people see the television shows, people see the books in print, the paper books, and they think that there's a lot of glamour in it, but it's a job just like any other. You have to take it seriously. And I have given the talk to so many people about if you don't take your career seriously, no one else will either. You have to make it clear to your children that this is your writing time and stick to it. And one of the things you never say to your 3-year-old is, do not bother mommy unless the house is on fire, because they will make it so.
Oh my gosh, that is so true.
It's accurate.
So your author help book, I have to ask, and I'm surprised Jen hasn't already, because is that from Buffy?
What's more with feeling? Well, it's a common phrase, but they use it.
That phrase has been around a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But that's also where my mind went, Erica. That's the most recent pop culture reference for it. Yes. That I was like, the Buffy musical. But
which I thought was very charming, but the phrase has been around a great deal longer than Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, I didn't know if it inspired. One of my book titles was inspired by Anchorman. I just wasn't sure it was inspired by that. I think that's brilliant. And then the other thing, I got to talk to you a little bit about this, but I know Jen kind of geeked out. Go ahead and ask about the Xanth book.
Yeah. So you wrote the guidebook with Piers Anthony, the Xanth book. So how can you tell us about it? I love Piers Anthony.
He's a terrific writer. He's a very nice man. I like him tremendously. This came about because my husband, who had, he has done many of these things. Many people would call him a book packager, but I think it was Avon Books called him a book facilitator because they had been burned by a different book packager. He had come up with doing guidebooks to known worlds. So he did the Guide to Castle Amber with beautiful illustrations by Todd Cameron Hamilton, who was a tremendously great artist. And at the same time, he was negotiating with Anne McCaffrey and Del Rey Books to do The Dragon Lover's Guide to Pern.
Yeah.
But it has to be because these are illustrated guides, something that has a lot of potential for illustrations. And Xanth was an obvious choice. So again, we went to Todd, got him signed up, and talked to Piers about it. And Piers thought that it was a great idea. Naturally, it's tremendously outdated by now, because he has added at least 2 more trilogies of 9 books each to his saga. But we went to his home in Florida and interviewed him for several days, asked him many questions. I love a good pun, and I can sling them with the best of them. He is a noted master of the terrible bad joke, and I love that. So it was a privilege to be able to work with him. We got along very well, I think. And the book is beautifully illustrated. We have some of the illustrations around the house, but you can see most of them in the book. And we had so much fun working on that. We got to meet the nightmare. Piers had this 26-year-old mare who lived with him, and the pony that kept her company. So there were a lot of things that were very interesting. The forest in which Bink lives is pretty much the tree farm on which Piers lives now. So
Wow.
a retired tree farm, great place to live because you are near nothing else. So he has the quiet he needs to work.
Oh, that is, well, so we reached out and talked to Piers. I think I mentioned this in your praise, and I talked to him and said, would you like to do the podcast? And he said he would love to, but then COVID hit. And I was just even telling Jen before we got on here, I was like, I am not going to be responsible for bringing COVID to Piers Anthony, like things on my list that I'm not going to be responsible for doing. Because you can't guarantee when you bring people to do a production, even if it's just recording in just a couple of us, that something won't happen. And I'm like, I can't be responsible for that at all.
He is an older gentleman. Do not make him sick.
Yeah.
No, exactly. He's like, I'd love to. I can't use a computer very well, so I want you to come in person. And I'm like, I want to, because I actually have on my bookshelf that visual guide to Xanth, because The Veil of the Bull was one of the first books that got me into reading a lot of fantasy. It was just, I love those books. They're some of my favorites.
Oh, I enjoyed them so much. My first contact with him really was because of the Choose Your Own Adventure books that I wrote that were set in his world, the Crossroads books, one of the first series that Bill came up with. And when Piers agreed that Xanth could be one of the series that we wrote in, I said, me. And working with him was a pleasure.
I love the idea of choose. How was that to write? We were talking about doing adult choose your own adventure books.
Well, that's what these were.
Were they adult and not like young adult, or were they? Because
no, they were written for adults.
They were adults.
Smart kids could read them, but
Yeah, I read all of those when, I was probably in high school, but I read, they were grown up. I always know, like you figure out very quickly, like page 88 means death, so don't go there.
Because Bill did 2 series. One of them was Crossroads, which were individual adventures. So Seven No Trump, which was set in Zelazny's Amber, and by the way, that was another one of the things that Bill did a guide to, and Combat Command, which was a series for Ace books that were choose your own adventures with troops, either ground troops or spaceships, fleets. And Robert Heinlein allowed us to do one in his world and so on. There were a number of really cool things that came out of that series. Those were definitely not for kids.
That is, I just have to say, every time I talk to you, I get more and more jealous of your life. I literally am like, this is like so amazing to have these stories and these interactions with these fantastic creatives. I'm jealous. That's
there is one.
I have been very lucky. I've no doubt about that.
It's amazing. I love choose your own adventure stories, partly because I grew up reading your series. I love, and Myth Inspirations, those were the other ones. But it's funny because I always think they're great. And then Neil Patrick Harris did his biography, his autobiography as a choose your own adventure. And I'm a crazy person. And I read it all the way through instead of following. And in the middle of the book, he has a page and he's like, why are you here? Are you reading this book straight through, you maniac? Da-da-da-da-da. So I always thought that was great. And then when I'm teaching and I talk about writing, and mostly we focus, it's college, we talk about writing essays. But every now and again, we'll talk about writing fiction, and I bring up choose your own adventure, and my students have no idea what that is. They're occasionally, some of them will be like, oh, you mean like on Netflix where you get to pick what Bear Grylls does next? Like that, like there are books like that? I'm like, yeah. So figure 20-year-olds today, the ones that
they weren't even born yet. They were not even born yet when Choose Your Own Adventures were a thing, because Crossroads and Combat Command books came out in 87 and 88.
Yeah. So.
And then Nintendo came along and that was the end of that.
Yeah, we need to bring back, I'm just saying, we need to bring back the Choose Your Own Adventures.
Mm-hmm.
We need to
We
bring
can do them
back.
electronically now. We can make them longer. The trouble with the books that we had was we could only make them so long. We could only have so many decisions on the decision tree.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a lot more than that now.
I was going to say, I think we should make Choose Your Own Adventure books that are like that big, that go through a whole thing. I'm about bringing this back. Maybe we'll have to talk project, because I think we can bring back the Choose Your Own Adventure, and especially in several different genres with the way genres are now. I mean, you talked about your time travel, like you had like 5 different genres with your short story. You can do something like that with Choose Your Own Adventure. I would also love Choose Your Own Adventure horror stories. I think that would be epic.
They had things like that, honestly. There were, but they were mostly very soft, aimed at kids, because you could only go so far in any of these novels. If it has illustrations, if it has an illustrative cover, you're going to attract young people. And how far do you want to go on that?
Well, we will not put illustrated covers, and I'm willing to go quite far on these. So if interested, I am willing to throw this in the hat again, because I think that would be a lot of fun. I miss them. I love them.
You would get adult readers with nostalgia too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you did it the right way and with the right stories, you would get younger readers. They're just not, some things just aren't reintroduced. It's so funny when I see younger people come up and talk about things, and I'm like, yeah, so we had that.
Nothing ever happened
about in 20 years, but we had it. So
nothing ever happened before they were born. You know that.
Yeah, no, it's true. One of my kids has my Blockbuster card and thinks it's the greatest thing in the world that they found my Blockbuster card. And I was like, that I didn't save that because it was Blockbuster. It happened to be in a box of stuff. And they were like, look what I found, above their head. And I was like, okay, fine. Yeah.
You want to go farther back? Ask him if he knows what an e-ticket is.
Oh, God.
They found 2 other things. They found my pager at one point in time.
Oh my God.
Like, is this like a tiny cell phone? Like, they were trying to figure it, when it slid out of its case, they were like, and I'm like, no, it's a pager. And they're like, what does it do? And I'm like, it's like a beeper. And they're like, okay, does it just beep? And I'm like, and then I had to explain it. And I was like, trying to explain it. And they were like, well, how did you know who was calling? And I'm like, because you remembered phone numbers. Like, that's how that works.
And there were public payphones, which are not a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they found a record, like a vinyl record.
Yep.
And this is before Stranger Things and all these kind of things came out that had records in them. And they were like, what is this? And I'm like, it's kind of like what a CD was before it was a tape. And they're like, a tape? And then I had to go find the tapes and pull the tapes out. And they're like, what do you do with that? And I'm like, this is just whatever. Get out of the house completely.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. Well, it's funny watching older shows like Buffy. Everything in that show would be solved with a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something I always wonder when you're writing, how much technology do you put into your story based on
I have made that mistake so often of making something that I thought could not be superseded and discovering, oh yes it can, oh yes it will. You have to be very vague on the structure of things. unless your story is about that discovery.
Do you think that, I've talked to authors who intentionally write before certain times in the past, or, everybody looks at Blade Runner now and goes, I wish, because of what that was in the future. But do you ever intentionally write in the past where like the idea of a cell phone would, that's not even a thing, moving on from there?
Oh, sure. The series that I picked, one of the series I picked up from Robert Asprin, the Dragon series, it takes place in 2003. So at least they're up to 2003. So there are still Blockbusters and there are record stores and other things that have gone by the wayside because of downloads. And just, I had a tremendous argument with the line editor from the publishing house because they kept saying, but these things exist, and driving through the mountains, of course you still have cell phone coverage. I said, not in 2003. But you didn't say it was 2003. It's pre-Katrina. It's pre a lot of things. There was no cell phone coverage everywhere. You could look at the maps and there were huge gaps in between. And this, I could not get through to this person. I finally had to go to the editor and say, I can't work with this person. She refuses to put her mind back far enough in the past.
Was she too young? Was she like 5 in 2003?
Yeah, probably.
Was that part of the
The
problem?
trouble with writing anything historical or anything with specialized knowledge, Bill talked, he had a copy editor who said about one of his military books, well, isn't a major higher than a colonel? Why was this person working on this book?
Yeah, you can Google that if you don't know. Like,
Apparently
that's
not.
something that you ask if you're not sure.
Well, yes, and everything should be queried.
Yeah.
So you have lots of little questions in the margin.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
And track changes is the thing that young writers are familiar with, but they don't get it about Post-it notes and red pens and other things.
Yes, no, exactly. Or paper, when things were on paper.
Yeah.
That's okay. Jen teaches English. They don't get it about track changes and all kinds of things that.
It blows my mind. Like, you would assume they're the digital like generation. They know how to use a computer. No, they don't. They just keep documents open because they don't know how to save them. So if, like, we use Canvas is our school program. So you upload it to Canvas, but if it doesn't save or something goes wrong, I'm like, that's fine, just send it to me again. They're like, oh, I didn't save it. The only way I keep things is because I have 172 tabs open on my screen. I'm like, what are you doing?
An old friend of mine is teaching computer science at a junior college in Illinois. And she had to explain to them that if you don't save it, it does not exist anymore when you turn off your computer.
Mhm.
And she said, I don't know how to tell them about this. I said, do you have a whiteboard in your office? And she said, yes. I said, okay, tell them to write something on the whiteboard, then erase it and say, where's that information now?
Mhm.
Unless you
Did
photographed it, it's gone.
It's gone.
Right.
Yeah, our computer class is the #1 failed class at my college.
What?
Our
Really?
intro to computers is the #1 CGS 1000 is the #1 failed class.
It's got to be there. Kids, we are digital immigrants. The kids who are being born today are digital natives. They have never lived in a life that did not have complicated computers. They have never heard the modem sound.
Oh, the wonderful modem sound.
That's
But
right.
I almost feel like it's similar to, like, I teach writing, and one of the things when I was going to school, everyone just assumed you knew how to write. They didn't teach you how. Like, when in any of my classes, they weren't like, this is a subject, this is a verb, this is a thing called a direct object. Like, they didn't do that when I was in school in the 90s, because like every 20 years we swing back and forth. In the 70s, they were like, you must recite it, tell us the thing. And then by the time you got to the 90s, people were like, no, we're not going to do that. People just know, you just absorb it. So then I get them in college, and now they're like, I don't know how to, I can't explain to you what's wrong with your sentence because you don't know how a sentence is supposed to work. Like, you don't have the vocabulary, you don't understand the terminology. It's like trying to explain to someone how to fix their car who doesn't know what it's like, well, the little silver piece needs to attach to the rubber gasket, and they need, like, so you don't have that framework, and I don't think we teach it. And I think the computers are in the same category. We just assume you know how to use it, and they know how to use a phone, but
No,
like,
I was gonna say, this is the technology they know how to use.
yeah.
This
And then
is the technology.
they'll try
They
to
don't
write a
know
book
how
on
to use
it.
a computer. They know this. And I know that at work too, because working with technology, because we're a SaaS company that I'm working at for 2 more days. But, it amazes me the people that don't know simple things about like emails and stuff like that, where you go, how do you not know how to do an email? But that's going by the wayside because everybody does text messages or voice to chat and stuff like that, and they don't know how to use a computer. They also don't teach typing anymore. I don't care whether it's a computer or not a computer, they don't teach you how to use a keyboard. And so they assume, yeah, oh my, don't get me started about that in cursive, because I made my kids learn how to write, because I was like, and I taught them how to read a map, an actual map, not a Google map, a map, because I'm like, you could get lost. I taught them about bus systems. I'm like, because if technology fails for whatever reason, you're going to have a lot of people that are stuck in places and don't know how to do anything.
Do you think that writing, like, you're judging these stories that people are writing now, has the writing shifted, do you think, because of the way that people are writing now? Like, has the technology affected the quality of writing or the feel of it?
One of the things that happened when people were able to get away from paper was the stories got longer and books got longer. So now you have massive doorstops instead of what used to be a perfectly acceptable novel, which was 60 to 80,000 words. Now they're 120, 150, 200,000. You have this sort of logorrhea, this outpouring of words that you didn't have before, because you were constrained by the amount of paper and the number of times that you had to retype your manuscript all the way from scratch.
Okay.
So what we're seeing with the contest is a much higher quality of story over time, because one of the things Writers of the Future does is to post online workshops for free to tell people how good stories are made, what is necessary to a good story, what's necessary about characterization and world building and things like that. I just read one where this person did not know about homonyms. So there were quite a number of wrong homonyms, but the story itself was pretty good. It was very good, better than I would have expected. And some of them have been really, really good. You like anything else, you walk into an echo chamber of people who are readers and creative, therefore they want to write as well. These are the ones who are reading. These are the ones who are attempting to write and practice their craft. Okay. And they're looking for ways to make that craft better. And every time one of the anthologies comes out, people read those and say to themselves, this is what good writing looks like. These are really good stories. I need to rise to this level. So the stories have been getting better and better and better over the years. Now, some people are incredibly creative. They play with things. I talked to a fellow who had written his entire his entire short story in sentences of 5 words only. And every paragraph was a multiple of 5 sentences. And mind you, the period was not necessarily the end of the thought in the sentence. So you had to get past the fact that there was punctuation there to enjoy it. But still, it was a good story.
Just playing with the rules.
He was playing with the rules because he was interested in experimenting with it. And he had a good enough command of language to be able to do that. And there are some people who have submitted to the contest who are just that good. And they're just ready to move on, to move up. Because of the delay, because of the pandemic, the winners from 2020 and 2021 attended last year's celebration this April.
Okay.
So there were, oh my gosh, no, it was October. There were 2 years worth of people in this gala. So some of them, having won the contest, were now no longer constrained as amateurs, and some of them have publishing contracts for books or for other short stories because they're that good.
Oh, wow, that's very cool.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
No, that's very awesome. Okay, we have to wrap this, but although I feel like we could just talk for days. I mean, I honestly feel that every time I get the opportunity to speak with you, I could talk to you for days. Okay, so shameless self-promotion time. What would you like to promote right now?
I am very pleased to say that a collection of cat stories by me called Cats Triumphant is about to be re-released, but this time under the aegis of Prince of Cats books. And it has an adorable cover that is so much better than the previous one. And it will be available in both paper versions and Kindle versions or ebook, all of the versions. So I'm very happy that this will finally be available. You can find me occasionally on Facebook, occasionally on my website, almost never on Twitter, but come and see me at conventions. I've posted the list of cons I'm going to be at this year. I teach the 2-day writers workshop at Dragon Con every year, Labor Day weekend every year. This will be year 12, I believe. And there's still some spaces left in my class, so come and sign up and join the fun. Okay,
now we have to talk at the con. You need to remember that, Jen, as you just rubbed your hands together. I need you to remember that we're obligated to do things. So
I know I have to do things. So.
Yes, as much as jumping into this class sounds amazing, and we'd love to, but they're going to go, hey, you're sort of speaking now. Can you go show up at your panel?
Gotta do things.
Yes, things and stuff. But I think it's an amazing opportunity. You are such an amazing guest, Jody. I love having you on this podcast. You're so much fun. Thank you so much for being here.
I'd love to come on with you.
Yes. And I'm just going to keep asking every time I see even like, oh, look, she's got a short story out. She should be back on the podcast. I just keep doing that. So this has been Drinking with Authors. I have been your host, Erica Lance. Our sponsor is Skunk Brothers Spirits. I forgot to mention them at the beginning because I'm drinking hot chocolate, so didn't count today. But the coupon code is DWA10. You can check them out. My co-host today has been the amazing J.M. Paquette, and our guest has been our guest. I'm fine. It really was just hot chocolate, I promise. Our guest has been Jody Lynn Nye, who is amazing, and we will see you guys next time.